Shoulder bumping your brass right now on Pirate Firearms and Reloading. So today I want to show you how to bump the shoulder back on your brass. So what that essentially means, instead of doing a full length resize of your case, this one happens to be a 308, all you're going to do is you're going to push the shoulder back here, okay? And there's a couple of reasons to do that. The first being that it prolongs the life of your brass. Instead of forcing your brass back to that semi-spec or that shape that your die produces every single time you load it, you're only bumping that shoulder back and resizing the case just enough to consistently and reliably feed in your chamber. Now this is probably not something I'd do on a semi-automatic rifle. I certainly wouldn't do it on anything like a lever action as well, but on a bolt action it's perfectly acceptable. So the less you work the brass, the less work hardening you will get, and therefore your brass will last longer. The other thing is it might give you just that little bit more accuracy out of your cartridge. What's going to happen is, because this is already sized essentially to your chamber after firing, it more closely represents the size and the cut of your chamber. Now, a lot of people will just go ahead and neck size, and that's absolutely fine too, but what you'll find after a couple of loadings, it won't chamber properly, and in some firearms, it probably won't even chamber properly on the first go. That's less than ideal, so all you're doing is you're just bumping that shoulder back. I like to bump it back about 2 thou in a bolt action rifle, and it's not full length sizing, but it's not neck sizing. It's kind of a happy medium in between. You've got to work out how much you want to bump that shoulder back. So what I've got here today is the Hornady headspace comparator set on my caliper. So there's an anvil base, there's an insert based on the case that you're shooting. D400 happens to match 308 Winchester, and the little adapter on here. So the adapter has a grub screw, and you just push it in, and then you screw in the grub screw, and as you can see here, the little thumb studs allow you to attach it to the jaws of your caliper with relative ease. And of course, when you close it all up, reset it to 0, and you're ready to go. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure these two cases here. These are actually already been full length resized. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a baseline. So I like to just give it a gentle turn like that. And as you can see there, 1.625. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zero that out there. So I'm going to check my other full length size case. Just for a bit of consistency, here we go. And maybe it's not so consistent. Here we go. So those two cases are exactly the same size. Now what we've got here is some once fired brass. So now where it becomes critical is measuring the difference between your once fired brass and your full length size brass. Now the reason you're comparing it to the full length size is to give you a data point. You know that when that die is set up as per the manufacturer, it's set up in a way that will always full length size. So we reckon that's probably about 3.5 thou over. We'll do this one. That one's about 3.5, maybe 4 thou over. Okay, that's really bouncing between the two numbers there. Make sure you can see that. So let's just call it 3.5 thou. So there's 3.5 thou difference between a full length size case and a once fired case. So now it gives us something to work on. So what we want to do is we want to bump the shoulder here on these once fired cases back 2 thou. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my tool cabinet and I'm going to get my trusty feeler gauges, and I'm going to show you how I set it up over on the press here. I've got my trusty feeler gauges here. Now as you can see, mine actually come in half thou increments, which happens to be perfectly handy. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, because it's 3.5 thou difference, and I want 2 thou, I'm going to do 1.5 thou of adjustment on this full length sizing die here. So as you can see, I've backed it out, it's ready to go. I have my shell holder in place. So what I'm going to do is run the ram to its full extension. Now, bearing in mind, if you have a cam over press, this is slightly different. The lead press here comes to an actual hard stop. And normally when you're setting this die up, you'd screw it in until it touches the shell holder like that. And then you bring it up, and you usually do about half a turn extra, and then that way the shell holder contacts the bottom of the die before it comes to the hard stop. We're now going to rely on the hard stop. So it's now hitting the hard stop and the die is clear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my feeler gauge and I'm going to slip it in under here, and I'm going to try and get as much material coverage as possible as I tighten down this die. Just like that. Now, while that's still in place, I'm going to spin up the lock ring. Right, so I'm going to test it one more time now, and I can see there's a little bit of a gap between the shell holder and the bottom of the die developing in here. So the camera probably won't pick it up, but there's a little bit of a gap. Now what should happen is when I close this up, I should just be able to move my feeler gauge through that gap like that. Okay, so there's now 1.5 thou between the shell holder and the bottom of the die. Okay folks, so now you can see 1.5 on there. So I have adjusted that 1.5 thou, which means that from the full length size case, it is 1.5 thou more, or from the once fired case, it will be 2 thou less. So this die is set up perfectly for bumping the shoulder back approximately 2 thou. So this only really works for this traditional single stage press. If you have a different press out there, there's a different set of tricks that you can use. I know Eric Cortina's got a good video on the Foster coax and how he does this with his dies. The Foster coax obviously doesn't have this bushing, and it doesn't have a shell holder. It's got a universal shell holder in the bottom, so the setup's a little different. But he did a really great video on that. So this is how I do it with a traditional single stage press with dead stops. If you've got cam over, you're probably going to need somebody to help you keep that ram in the fully extended position while you adjust. You don't have the luxury of coming to a hard stop and do what I do, where I just put my knee against the ram handle here and lock it in place. It's an easy way to do it. So hopefully that's a nice simple one, and it's a real simple excuse for not full sizing your brass and just getting that brass life extended and getting a little bit of accuracy out of it for no extra money. You've already bought your full length sizing die, so it's not that hard to back it out, you know. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I release new videos every Friday, so hit that notifications bell so you don't miss out on anything. See you in the next one.